Well, the last time we had a surprise election was 2017, and that went wonderfully well, as you'll remember. I can still remember in 2017 sitting in my office. I was at the Home Office at the time, and had the screen on. And as soon as that lectern went out without a government crest on, I just remember thinking, right.
Sir Brandon Kenneth Lewis, welcome to your exit interview. A chance for us both to learn what you could have done better. You've been the Conservative MP for Great Yarmouth since 2010, so why are you leaving?
25 years elected between local council and Parliament. And I just think there's a cycle to these things. Like when I first got elected to Parliament, it was a seat that at times people didn't think we could win from Labour. At best we thought we might have one term. And my intention, I came from business. My intention was always eventually to go back to business. And I just now felt the right time. I've been very lucky. I had a great ministerial career, so I just take a view there's maybe leave before anybody pushes you.
Now, we've known each other for a long time, so you won't be surprised I'm a bit cynical. Is there any connection between the state of the opinion polls over the last 18 months and your decision to quit now rather than any of the other previous elections?
No, look, if you take my own parliamentary seat, we've got a 17,600 majority, 67.5% of the vote. We campaign a lot. We actually beat the odds against Labour last year and held control of Great Yarmouth Borough Council. So I think we're in a good place. And I think my successor should win the seat, and I think we can hold the seat. So for me, it was just about what's the right time for me to spend some more time with my wife and do a bit of travelling and get back into business a bit.
It was previously quite a UKIP-y part of the world,
yeah.
Great Yarmouth and that area. Clearly, Brexit Party didn't stand there last time round. Assuming that reform will be there, you've obviously worked out how to continue winning seats even with UKIP on the march. What should the Conservative Party do about reform now that Nigel Farage is back leading it?
Yeah, look, I mean, you're right. In 2015, we were a really key target, both for Labour and at that point UKIP, and obviously in 2017 we had a Brexit candidate as well. And actually at every election I managed to increase our majority. I think it's just because we focused on what we were doing for people locally. Obviously, we had the advantage of we were calling a referendum, and then obviously in 2019, obviously with Boris and Brexit and Corbyn gave us a really good boost, and the result that we got in 19. But even in 15 and 17, we increased majority. And that was by focusing on what we were doing locally and getting around, working hard, campaigning hard locally, and delivering for people. And we've done that even in the last few months. We've had the opening of the third river crossing in Great Yarmouth, which I'm very pleased with and very proud of. Great team effort from everybody there. So, yeah, being focused on those local issues. I personally take the view, always have done, that the amount of national coverage that the general elections get means that people know where the national parties are. So as a local candidate in your local constituency, the only difference you can make is driving on the local issues, as an MP, what you've been doing locally and how you've been delivering for people and working for people locally. And that's where you can make some difference. I think it's probably more marginal than any of our egos would like to admit. But if you're going to do something, you've got to focus on those local things. We've always focused and been determined about that in Great Yarmouth.
And what is the future of the Conservative Party in the immediate, short term, in the next few weeks of the election? Is it to try and ape reform, to try and out Farage, or is it to turn back to the centre where traditionally both of the main parties win when they're the more centre-focused party?
I mean, the short answer is I don't know, but I would hope that it's not to try and out reform. You don't win from the extreme of any part of politics. That both Labour through Miliband and Corbyn's time have proven that on the left, and I think on the right we've seen that as well. I mean, we didn't exactly have the sort of resounding results we would have liked in the early 2000s when we pushed to the right as well. So you win elections in the middle ground. You win elections from convincing those people who are generally undecided or don't have particularly strong tribal views that your offer is going to make them, their family, their friends, their community better off in the future, whether it's in the strength of the community or financially better off, whatever their focus is. I think you do that from the middle ground. Obviously, I would sit on the right of the middle ground, but I don't think you win from going extreme right. I think people want to see sort of pragmatic approaches to things that are going to make the country better for them and for their families.
Was there because obviously quite a lot of MPs stood down when Parliament was prorogued. Was there did you sort of formed a gang? What was the mood amongst the dozens of Tory MPs that announced you were standing down? Was it relief that you weren't standing? Was it surprise because you thought you'd got another 3-4 months in the job?
Probably a mix. Ultimately, I made my mind up some time ago, and I went public a few months ago around not standing again. Obviously, there was a number of colleagues who made their announcements right at the end. And yeah, absolutely. I suspect a few of them made their announcements because they thought they wouldn't have to make those announcements for a little while yet. So there was definitely surprise around Parliament at the election. I think everybody listening to the comments around later in the year, second half of the year, kind of assumed it would be after the conference season. I don't think it's a great secret. Most people thought it would probably be called effectively at the party conference point to then have a November election. So I think it did catch people by surprise, yeah, and I think different people react to that in different ways.
Do you think it was the right thing to do to surprise everyone with a July election?
Well, the last time we had a surprise election was 2017, and that went wonderfully well, as you'll remember. I can still remember in 2017, sitting in my office, I was at the Home Office at the time, and had the screen on. And as soon as that lectern went out without a government crest on, I just remember thinking, right, phoning my wife and saying, I think we're going to be busy for the next few weeks. That was quite a shock. And I think this had a similar impact. I mean, the difference this time was, I think when Theresa May did it in 17, she did it in the morning, so it genuinely caught everybody by surprise. Whereas this time, there was that whole day of, this is clearly happening. And so by the sort of 5 o'clock, it wasn't the biggest surprise in the world, actually. But look, doing it that day, yeah, definitely caught people by surprise. And
if you'd done it in the morning, it might not have been raining.
Well, actually, that morning it definitely wasn't raining. Yeah. So, yeah.
Let's rewind a bit talk about your emotions and how your motivations more and how you got in to politics. You said at one point, you talked about being bullied as a child. You said older kids thought I was too stupid to succeed. You talked about how that sort of drove you on, sort of proved them wrong. Why is it that you felt that politics was the thing that you wanted to prove them wrong at?
Well, I don't think it was, actually. I mean, yeah, I didn't find out too much later in life that I was dyslexic, and I think actually my challenges at school were, with hindsight, around dyslexia probably. But no, for me, politics was an evolution. I got involved in a few things in my local community, and a couple of people there were councillors and said, oh, you should get a bit more involved. If you thought about standing for council, it would take a couple of hours of your time every couple of months. A line I've used myself and others since, I have to say. And then I got to know Eric Pickles and the team in Brentwood, and they encouraged me to stand. So I did. I became a councillor first. So it was very much an evolution. And well, in 97, I was 26, and there weren't many 26-year-olds getting active in the Conservative Party back then. So I very quickly...
1997, I can say. Yeah.
So very quickly, people say, oh, you should come to this, you should come to that. I can still remember, actually, I'd almost been put off by a councillor came to see me and basically said, look, you know, when you're 40, come and talk to us. And the party professional locally said to me, look, just come to an event on Friday night. I'll introduce you to a few people. So I went along to this thing on the Friday night, and it turned out to be a packed village hall, and he saved me a seat facing the audience. And that's when I found out I'd just been elected unopposed as the deputy chairman of the Brentwood and Ongar Conservatives. And it kind of just evolved for me from there. I never set out to be an MP. It was after that I got talked into being a candidate. I stood in 2001 in Sherwood in Nottinghamshire, and that's when I really decided, actually, yes, I do want to do this. I sort of got that. You'd have spoken to a lot of people about it. There's a reality with politics. If that bug gets you and you think you can do something, and one of the things we're always a bit being British and humble, we don't say it enough, but actually for anybody thinking about getting into public life, the reality is, if you're doing it for the right reasons and you can do things to change things, to make people's lives better, it feels good. It's a good thing to do. And I always encourage people, whatever party actually, to get involved for that reason. I definitely got that bug as a councillor, really. And then the 01 election showed me that actually, if you really want to make a difference, you've got to be in Parliament. Before we come on to you entering the comments, you mentioned Eric Pickles. We have to discuss your career as a DJ. I wouldn't go quite as far as describing it as a DJ, but yes.
So you and Eric used to do a radio show?
We did, yeah, on Phoenix FM radio in Brentwood. Yeah, it was when they were trying to get their licence. Then when they got their licence, it generally consisted of Eric and I arguing over how much Mary Shaping Carpenter music we were going to play. As he didn't know how to use the system, we didn't play a lot. And then arguing over the best film of the week, and we have very different taste in movies. So, it was good fun, actually. It was very much a community kind of radio show. Local people coming in to talk about things they were doing locally and playing a bit of probably bad music.
what would be your choice on the turntables?
I've actually become in recent. I'm quite a big fan of country and western music. So right now it'd be Luke Combs, Luke Bryan, Morgan Wallen. A bit that kind of music's my
and
taste.
Eric wouldn't have liked that.
He doesn't mind that so much, but he's very fixed on Mary Shaping Carpenter.
Okay.
He can listen to a lot of that and classical music. He's a massive opera and classical music fan, actually.
Well, there we are. I feel like I've learned something. So you get elected in 2010, and then during that period, then obviously the Conservatives were in coalition, and then in government in their own right, you were a housing minister under David Cameron. You were minister in the Home Office under Theresa May, then immigration minister later, then Conservative Party chair. Before becoming a Brexit minister, then Northern Ireland secretary under Boris Johnson, a brief stint as Justice Secretary under Liz Truss, because all stints,
glorious 5 weeks.
all stints were brief under Liz Truss. When you look back on all of those, they're all big jobs. They're all actually sort of on the front line, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Which did you enjoy, and which was the hardest?
The hardest was probably immigration. But yeah, I enjoyed all of them, actually. I mean, I was lucky. When I look back, I mean, housing and planning minister I enjoyed because I still passionately believe we need to be building houses, and we've not done well enough on that, particularly in the last couple of years. There's a lot more to do on that, and I've continued to champion that. Doing the national security is hugely fascinating. Northern Ireland was an absolute honour. There's something very special about Northern Ireland. Peter Mandelson once said to me, it's one of those jobs that unless you've done it, you can't really appreciate just how special it is, and he's right. It's a phenomenal job working for an amazing part of the UK, for a fantastic community. So I really did enjoy that. But I have to say, and there's things I did in all of those. The Housing and Planning Act I'm very proud of. I mean, Eric actually had this great line when I first became a minister: in every job you do something. And I'd like to think I have. Now, people may not always like what I've done, but I have done something. And the Housing Planning Act I'm very proud of. In Northern Ireland, very proud of the work we did to protect veterans and to give women in Northern Ireland proper access to healthcare support for abortion and things like that. I'm very proud of that. And actually, even at the Ministry of Justice, we dealt with some stuff around tagging, we dealt with some stuff around trans prisoners, but mostly we managed to end the bar strike, which I think was a massive thing to do, really important. And they opened up the opportunity to get on top of some of the backlog. So even in that short time, I'm very proud of what we did. But in all of them, I have to say, you can only deliver these things as part of a team with the civil service, with your special advisors and with your colleagues. You
mentioned the immigration job. It's a hard job, not least when successive leaders of yours have promised to bring net migration down to the tens of thousands.
I got close. I think I got the closest. Yeah.
But still didn't make it. And it's gone in the wrong direction ever since. Was it a mistake to keep putting this is a live debate again now. Both parties promising to bring it down, but not putting a number on it. And everyone's like, what does coming down mean? Yeah, I mean, I think they're right not to put a number on it because, and even when I was housing minister, I remember being told that I had a target of 1 million homes. I never ever set a target. I always think arbitrary targets are a fool's game. You want to deliver more homes, and actually on immigration you want to get control of immigration. My view is always the British public want to know that the government understands who is coming in the country and that there is some level of control. I think that's much more important than whether it's 5 people or 50 people or 5,000 people. It's about control, because I think most people do recognise that our country has been developed and grown with migration. There is no indigenous English species. I'm only 3rd generation from migrants, whether it's the Romans, the Normans, various conquests over centuries. And I think people do recognise that. And the strength of our country is its interwoven nature and what people bring to the table and the work effort they put in and the way they've developed businesses here and played important parts in businesses. But that's not the same as having control and having an understanding of what's going on our borders. And as an island, I think that's a legitimate ask of a government. So I think having a focus on using bringing down immigration as a point to make what is really the underlying point is we will have control and we will know what's going on. I think that's what the British public want to see rather than an arbitrary number. I want to ask you about Northern Ireland as well, because I think while you were there, Sinn Féin won the Northern Ireland Assembly elections, and clearly what's going on in Northern Ireland politics is both actually and on the island of Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland as well. There is clearly a shift there. Do you worry about the possibility? It looks like Scottish nationalism might be on the wane because of the SNP's fortunes, but the opposite might be happening. Could we see a time when Northern Ireland, the Irish reunification happened? I would still be very surprised if we even see the referendum or Irish unification in my lifetime. I don't see it in the foreseeable future for a whole range of reasons. And actually the current structure, if it's operating well, it kind of works for everybody. I still remember in my early days, actually,
a Catholic nationalist businessman actually said to me, the most important thing you'll ever do for me as Secretary of State is never ask me to decide between my head and my heart, because my business, connects with the UK and the rest of the world, but in my heart, I believe in a united Ireland, and I don't want to have to make that choice. And I think that plays out. There was a really interesting article in the spring of 2021, I think it was, by Robert Shrimsley, actually. And he got a bit of stick for the time, but I think he was right, which was there's a growing population in Northern Ireland, Protestant and Catholic, who just want to get on with life, not worrying about constitutional issues. They worry about, are their kids getting a good education? Can they look forward to a good job? Are the potholes being fixed? I actually think that's why the Alliance Party's done very well in the last couple of years in Northern Ireland. And the growth of the Alliance Party, I think, highlights that in a positive way, that Northern Ireland's moving beyond necessarily voting on sectarian grounds all the time. And there's a generation and generations coming through who want to vote on issues that affect their daily lives.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, and demographics and changing.
Yeah, and the big challenge for Northern Ireland, I think, is actually I sort of made this point at the COVID inquiry a couple of weeks ago. The big challenge for Northern Ireland that I thought we might have looked at in the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement year was to get some sort of international symposium with the Americans, academics from around the world and the parties in Northern Ireland to look at what's the next stage of evolution. How, the Good Friday Agreement was meant to evolve. It did with various other agreements, but it's been static for quite a while. And if you look at the growth of the Alliance Party and what's going on the ground, it kind of needs to think about, okay, what next? So that we do actually have Stormont working in a stable way for people.
It's not constantly on the
exactly,
walking out of it. We'll come in a moment to some classic exit interview questions. One of the things that's come up a lot when I've been doing these, and there's been a never-ending supply because so many people have stood down. The difficulty.
We're just here to make your job easier,
exactly.
Matt. That's the thing.
Unfortunately, the series has got to run for the next 5 years. Is the difficulty of maintaining a healthy lifestyle as an MP, but actually, you're one of the few people who seem to have pulled it off. You lost 5 stone. Is that right?
Well, 4.5.
4.5 stone.
Yeah.
And I remember taking you out for lunch when I used to do such things with ministers, and you were on a health kick. How do you manage to pull that off when everyone else seems to talk about how difficult it is?
Oh, it is difficult. Look, my problem was I've always had nothing. I can't blame politics for this. I've always had an addictive problem with chocolate. I'm a huge chocolate fan.
Anything in particular?
No, but Cadbury's, Snickers bar. I can eat Snickers and M&Ms until they're just out of stock. And for me, particularly actually, if you're driving from London to Norfolk, you stop at a petrol station and you just wipe out I'll get back in the car with 5 bags of various bits of chocolate and they're gone in half an hour. So I found I was living on junk food and burgers and eating very late and lots of chocolate. But I'd always been big. I was big at school. And I just had one of those points that you sort of read about where I just thought, I've got to do something about this. So my wife was hugely supportive and I just cut out the chocolate and the starchy carbs and the junk food. Yeah. I didn't particularly consciously realise at the time, but I effectively did keto for about 6 months. I've always liked training, but of course, if you're then not eating the crap and you're training, it just dropped off. And once it starts, it gives you momentum. Yeah. So I was able to keep it up, and I've now kept it off for a year, 18 months. And I feel better now than I have done for 20, 25 years. Yeah.
Well done, because there'll be plenty of your colleagues who will be still amazed that you managed to do it. Let's turn our attention to some classic exit interview questions then. Your bosses. You've had several. Let's start with David Cameron. Sum up David Cameron in a word.
Collegiate. I didn't work. Obviously, I was a minister for David, but I wasn't in cabinet with David. So I was really working for Eric Pickles and then Greg Clark. Both of them very different characters to work for directly. I was spoilt with Eric in that I knew him before I came into Parliament. He was brilliant to work for. He knew what he wanted to deliver as a Secretary of State, knew how to get the machine firing on all cylinders, had good people around him. Greg's very, very thoughtful guy, very clear about what he wanted to do as well. And actually, to be fair, because I've been doing the housing planning job already when Greg got there, kind of let me just get on with it. And David trusted me in that sense to do it as well. So, so as I say, I didn't work directly with David, but my dealings with him always, it was very easy to work with. He did get me he asked me to do the Sunday trading laws, which was an interesting experience. When he patted me on the back and said, "We've decided to do Sunday trading. We've decided you can take it forward."
This was to liberalise it, so
to liberalise it further. Yeah, doing it via working with local governments. They wanted me to do it because of the local government connection.
But it then didn't happen.
No. It was I think the first piece of legislation we lost after the 2015 election because we got a rebellion. The SNP decided to play despite it not having any impact in Scotland whatsoever, and that was the end of that, basically.
Right, Theresa May in a word.
Actually, I'm struggling with a word on Theresa. Public service, actually. I know it's 2 words, but...
You're allowed that. Some people have very long sentences.
Yeah, no, public service. I liked working with Theresa. I was her chairman. I found her brilliant to work. She let me and my team at CCHQ get on and do our job. I think she's one of the people I've seen most focused on doing what she feels is right for the country. That's why she carried on as an MP, I suspect, for the last Parliament as well. I've got a huge amount of time and respect for Theresa. I thought I've always thought she was very genuine about wanting to do the right thing by the country in very, very difficult circumstances. And I'd like to think history would judge her a lot fairer and better than she was at the time.
Boris Johnson in a word.
Fun, but I mean, it was chaos. I mean, it was just, but I've got to say again, I'm going into a longer answer, but I've got to say, Boris was actually quite easy to work for. As a sort of chairman of the board, prime minister, my experience of working with him as a secretary of state was he let me do my job. He didn't interfere. Northern Ireland's a complicated, tricky area. He trusted my team's judgment and our judgment. When I needed to go and see him on stuff, he was much more on the ball than people give. I mean, he really did know the detail. Much harder working than he gets credit for. So, I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that in the latter part of his premiership, it was chaotic. But he was actually much easier to work for than he gets credit for. I enjoyed working with him as a PM, actually, to be fair. And if you're going to turn to Liz, finally, a similar point, actually. The reason I got the bar strike finish was Number 10 did not interfere and let us get on with it and do our job.
They're probably a bit busy with other things.
Well, yeah. Although at the beginning, actually, the beginning there was quite a lot going on. But you know, it's not often a Number 10 team on something of that scale would just leave you alone and trust you to do your job. So in that respect, it's fine. But it was an unbalanced team.
So sum up Liz Truss in a word.
Focused.
What's been so brilliant about doing this series is when I ask that question, you can see there's a whole load of words that go through someone's mind.
Exactly, yeah.
Before you get to the one that you think is acceptable.
Well, yeah. Although, look, to be fair, whatever you think of Liz, and I think I know she gets a lot of criticism for coming out over the last year or so, still making a case for what she believes in. I think what that shows is she was genuine about wanting to do something. She was focused on delivering. Now, you might not like or agree with what she wanted to do or how she went about it, but to her credit, she wanted to be PM because she wanted to do something rather than just be PM for the sake of being PM.
So you backed, actually, in that leadership contest, first of all, you backed Nadeem Zahawi.
Yep.
Then you backed Liz Truss. Given that what's happened under Rishi Sunak now, is there an element of I told you so? You obviously clearly didn't think he was the right person.
Well, I decided to stand down over the weekend after Liz resigned. But whether Rishi would have offered me a job or not, I resigned. I just felt I've done 10 years continuously. I've had some great jobs. And I'm very comfortable with the decision I made.
It's interesting because there's lots of, I mean, he won amongst Tory MPs in the ballot before it went out to members. He was clearly ahead. What was it that you thought he lacked, or is it obvious now given what's happened over the last 18 months?
I don't think I need to add too much. But look, people forget, when we only go down to the final 3 with MPs as well. So what none of us really know is what would have happened with the people who voted for Penny if there'd have been a runoff with
Morton,
MPs. Yeah, if there'd have been a runoff between Liz and Rishi with the MPs, where would those votes have gone? Who knows? Liz won comfortably with the membership. As I say, I just felt I've done 10 years. I felt that was quite enough, and I'd enjoyed what I'd done, and I think I was lucky to have some of the jobs I had, and fortunate enough to have those experiences. And look, I was Lord Chancellor through for me, a very upsetting period when we lost Her Majesty, but also it's quite a surreal period when I'm doing the accession meeting for the King. That's something in history that I'll never forget, and nor will my family. It's quite a special thing.
Well, in the interest of completeness, then, how would you sum up Rishi Sunak in a word?
Managerial.
Too managerial.
I think
he hasn't managed all that well.
Look, for me, if you're going to govern and you're going after 14 years in government, if you're going to inspire people to come out and vote, you've got to lead, you've got to be doing things. I think one of the challenges for us as a party after 14 years is how do you show you've got new, fresh ideas to lead things forward rather than just managing what you've been doing, and that's a real challenge that Rishi and the team have got to show over the next few weeks. And as the manifesto comes out, I'm sure they'll be looking to put some things in there to show people they've got really good, fresh ideas. And that's what you've got to do. If you've got to give people a reason to come out and vote. One of the things I've always thought, but whether it's local politics or national politics, you don't get elected because of what the other side are or are not doing. You get elected because of what you are going to do. You've got to show people that if they vote for you, it's going to make a positive difference to the lives of them and their family in the future. And we've got to do that over the next few weeks, and we've got to do it with spades on, bearing in mind where the polls are.
Given where the polls are, let's assume that they're right and there is going to be a change of government. There's going to be an almighty bun fight for the future direction of the Conservative Party. Which way do you think it would go? I mean, you've been old friends with Priti Patel for a long time. She's been very quiet. She's the sort of dark horse of this whole race. Is she the sort of person that could come through as the next leader of the Tory party?
Well, I think whatever. First, we've got to see who succeeds. Look, I mean, people forget in 2017, we went into that election with about a 20-point lead and arguably lost the election. Boris went into 2019 behind and got an 80 majority. So there is still all to play for in the next few weeks, you know.
Despite everything you've said about
look, and I was chairman of the party in 2018 when people told me we'd be wiped out in London. We actually gained a council from Labour and won seats. So, and councils around the country. So, you know, things happen in elections. Let's wait and see what happens, what's in the manifesto and what we can deliver. But look, if by some shock the Conservatives are in opposition, then the first step I would say is first you've got to see who are the MPs, because that will shape who are the final two. But I would strongly be saying to colleagues, one of the things I learned as chairman and I've seen consistently over the years in politics is you can't win if you're not a united party. The party has got to learn a lesson and come together. It's got to unite. It's got to be focused. But we've got to see who's around and who wants to do it. You know, it's not a straightforward job. David Liddington once said on TV, I remember, the closer he got, the more he saw of the job of being Prime Minister, the less you want it. And I think there's some truth in that. So, you know, people have got to be clear about what it is and who's capable, who's the right person to do it. But the ultimate thing is the party needs to unite. Nothing hits our poll rating more than a divided party. So the party's got to unite in the next few weeks to go on, take the battle out there to Labour and everybody else and try and get that majority and return a Conservative government in some description. And if we can't, then we've got to learn that lesson really quickly and get united again to come back as quickly as possible, because the country needs that.
Let me ask you about a couple of other classic exit interview questions. Which part of the job or moment in the job did you enjoy the least?
Weirdly, actually, probably when I was policing minister. It's a great job and our police force are brilliant, so don't misunderstand me, but we have devolved the power to the PCCs, which I actually think devolving the power is a good thing to do. Police and crime commissioners, which I think is a good thing to do. But it does mean the policing minister role doesn't have a lot to get your teeth into, because you're going out, you're supporting and working with them, which is really important. But I kind of like just getting on doing things and delivering things. So in that sense, probably
given the terrible turnout in those elections, we saw it a few weeks ago, where there were no local elections, the turnout for those.
Yeah, it's dreadful.
Is that worked? Is it time to rethink that?
Well, I think one of the challenges is you've got to look at, how do you raise the priority? So the mayors have actually caught the imagination. They've been able to connect with their communities in a way that most of the police and crime commissioners just haven't been able to do. So I think, and there's some areas, merging that with the local mayoralty, which happens in London, obviously, Sadiq is technically in charge of it, probably does work better. And you've got to, I don't think government should be afraid of looking at how do you evolve this. I think the concept of devolving power away, somebody in Whitehall, a policing minister in Whitehall, as brilliant as any of us might like to think we are, can't possibly know what's the right thing to do on the streets of a town just outside Durham. Somebody more local needs to have that. I think it's right that we devolve that power. But evolving how you do that and the structure in which you do that, I don't think it's a bad thing. And it's one of the problems. Everybody in politics now is scared of being accused of U-turns. And actually, I think sometimes we need to be a bit less afraid of saying, well, okay, with our experience now, this is how I'd evolve it. This is a different view, and things change.
It's partly the downside of being in government for so long, as you have all these things and you just feel trapped by, well, we can't change our minds on that, even though it was 10 years
There's
ago.
always that risk, And I think having the courage to say, look, what was right 10 years ago was good, that was right at that point in time, but things have evolved, things have changed. We need to react to that, particularly post-COVID, post the war in Ukraine and the Middle East. We are in a very different place.
One of the things that's come up a lot in these interviews is just the pressure, the abuse, the intimidation, whether it's in person or online. Have you experienced that? And would you recommend going into Parliament to someone you liked and cared about?
I have experienced it. ranging from online Twitter abuse. And you pretty quickly get a thick skin around the base. It probably says more about the person tweeting it than it does about the person they're tweeting about. And I've had death threats, etc. So. I've seen all of that. And I mean, the worst I had was during the fire strikes, actually. And some of the abuse on there from people involved in the fire strikes actually was the only time that was upsetting was my kids were quite young at the time, and one of my kids saw some of that and it had an impact, and that was quite difficult. But so it is difficult. And I think one of the challenges for all political parties now going forward is the risk that because the way social and digital media is developing and growing, that you can become a kind of celebrity through that. And we've got to make sure we're not attracting people into politics for that purpose, rather than because they want to do something for their communities, or that you get caught up in that kind of world. I think that can be quite dangerous for both parties, actually. So it is difficult. And I would say to anybody coming into politics, look, it's brilliant, because if you, as I said at the beginning, if you can do something that makes somebody's life better, whether it's fixing a pothole that's been driving them nuts every day, or changing a law that makes people safer, or giving women access, as say, to healthcare for abortion in Northern Ireland, I'm really proud of that. But you've also got to balance that with the fact your private life is over. You for the rest of your life, and potentially if you've got a family, your family's life. Every time you go in a restaurant, you've got to think twice before you complain about something, for fear of being accused. Even if you genuinely have a reason to complain, you get accused of something, or just being misinterpreted, or whatever it happens to be. It's a very, very fine line these days around abuse and fair criticism, and that kind of intrusion can be quite challenging. And I don't see that going any other way than becoming more intense. And people have got to come in with their eyes open about what that means for them and their family and their private life.
What advice would you give someone arriving in Parliament a couple of days after the local election as a new MP?
Don't go on Twitter after, as chairman I always said to candidates, stay off Twitter after 10 o'clock at night or any alcohol. And I still think that's a fair bit of advice. There's a fair few who would have benefited from staying away from social media late at night and after drinks.
Finally then, Brandon Lewis, you're leaving the Commons. What will you do next?
Well, I'm going to spend a bit more time with my wife, reminding my wife and kids what I look like. Because, when you're in those jobs for 10 years, they're pretty full on. And I've realised, one of the things I realised when I stood down from government, actually, in the last year or so, is I've kind of missed a lot of my kids' teenage years growing up. And I'm going back into business. I'm already doing some business on the board of a few companies. I'm enjoying that.
You're doing very well at that. According to the Observer, you earned £400,000 alongside your work as an MP. So you're
oh, really? Okay, I've not sorted it out quite like that. I have to trust the Guardian. So, yeah.
Very good. Brandon Lewis, thanks so much for joining us for your exit interview.
Thank you.